Hi, I'm Charlie Bush. I'm the City Administrator here in Sedro-Woolley, and we are recording a presentation that we provided to City Council at a work session in early January, and putting on YouTube in this way so that it's a little more accessible to the public. Hopefully this is a presentation that you can reference in the future. I put this together with our Finance Director Kelly Kohnken, and Kelly will have a second installment of this presentation, not the exact same slides, but her own slides that are a little more specific to our city. That will get released a bit later. So let's get started. So this is a general budgeting presentation, and it is put together partly with slides from the Association of Washington Cities. Every year I'm involved in the budget workshop with the Association of Washington Cities and present there. And we wanted to start with an analogy that budgeting is a team sport. If you think about it, our community members, our voters are the owners of the team. You all own the city government and pay taxes and fees to us to provide services back to you and to other folks. And you don't necessarily, want to be calling all the plays on the field, but you can make organizational changes. We have elections every 2 years, and the mayor and council members are certainly up for election. So the council, and this is directed, this presentation towards the council is like the board of directors. And they help determine our mission and vision. They help determine which strategies the city is going to pursue to try to make progress. They determine how progress is being made and how it's measured in partnership with the staff. And then also how much it should cost to make progress. Is it worth it to make progress for the cost of that progress? There are a lot of different budget makers, and they all have different roles. We as a government want to hear from the public. We have public hearings and other participation processes through the budget that occur. We're also doing more online surveys these days. We've got a social media feed as well. There are ways to get your point across. You can email the city council. You can email staff. We do our best to collect all of that and see that that is engaged into the budget making process, all of that input. The council has a role in adopting the budget at the fund level. Each of our departments puts the budget together by department, by area, and then we assemble that whole budget, and that's what the administration does largely, is we put all the pieces together, try to make sure it all fits, make sure that council's goals and policies are reflected, make sure public input is reflected to the degree possible. We present all that to the city council, and then the city council ultimately decides if we got it right or not, or makes tweaks or adjustments to make sure that we get it right going forward. And we do a biennial budget here in Sedro-Woolley. It's a 2-year budget, which we adjust then over time. It's normal to amend budgets as you go. So we have a 23-24 budget that we're currently under, entering the 24 segment of that. And we will be working on the 25-26 budget this fall, in the fall of 24. And that will set our course for the next 2 years. So related tools, this is the reporting pyramid, and this is a way to think about how budget information is shared. So our community members generally have the least amount of knowledge, and our businesses and investors about exactly what's going on in the budget and monitoring the budget. Next level down is the council. We provide quarterly reports to the council on budget status, how we're doing in different funds in different areas. The mayor and myself, as the city administrator, we're kind of at the next level where we're looking in more detail at budgets and budget progress and trying to spot issues that might arise before they become bigger problems. Our department directors are much more in the depths of the budget, working with our division managers to, again, make sure that we are monitoring carefully, spending wisely, doing all the things that we set out to do, and making adjustments as things change, because they always do in a budget. Last year or 2 years ago, we had somewhat unprecedented, at least for a very long time, certainly in my career, 25 years, inflation, which had a huge impact across all of our line items. That is the kind of thing that we have to adjust to, that we can't predict entirely when we put the budget together in one time period that's sometimes 2 years out from when we're going to spend funds. And then managers and supervisors, very detailed knowledge about what it is they manage and supervise. So why do we have budgets? Well, they're legally required. They provide accountability. We can track how public funds are being spent. They're a management tool to look at how we're doing. We can look at our effectiveness of our services and look at how much we're spending to deliver those services and ask questions about whether that's worth it or whether we can get better. And if we do get better, we can look at how we've done that and to what degree. There are a whole bunch of elements to that we can explore. And it's a planning document. It forces us to think about the future and figure out how we would like to spend funds to advance the community in ways that the community wants to advance. It provides accountability. Again, this is an area of interest for our taxpayers, certainly. How are we spending your money? What are we doing with the money? It provides an opportunity for performance evaluation. We will be looking at performance measures as time goes along here in each of our departments. We already have some, but we'll be getting more refined in that process and providing more detail out to the council and public about what we're tracking, what we're seeing. Allows us to connect the dots, though, allows us to see, hey, if we spend money over here, maybe it affects something over there, gives us more situational awareness. And then performance management and auditing. There is a program through the state. There was a state initiative a few years back that provided funding to the state auditor's office to do performance audits, and there's a lot of proactive assistance available through the state auditor's office as well. And the city of Sedro-Woolley has taken advantage of some of those opportunities through the auditor's office, and we'll continue to look at where we can benefit from what is there. So the National Advisory Council on State and Local Budgeting defines the mission of the budget process in this way, and it really emphasizes promoting stakeholder participation, and so that's something we're going to intentionally be thinking more and more about as we move forward here. How can we engage the public more? How can we engage our business community more? How can we engage all of our members of our departments more, who are the ones who are delivering services, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of different stakeholder groups in the budget process. It's important to go through the process of defining them and then thinking about, are we asking the right questions of people at the right stage of the process to make sure we get our budget really dialed in to where it hits the mark for folks. This is more the overall process of the budget. So you can see at the top, you get stakeholder input. There's a vision and mission that's set by the council. The council also sets short-term goals, and then that provides direction to staff. So the council's goals allow us to figure out, okay, we need to make sure we allocate resources to these, meaning money and staff time. And we also have financial policies that we have to meet. So that's all a part of kind of the recipe for putting the budget together, for cooking the budget, if you will. We then have departments looking at the impacts of what's going on in the world to their operating budget. For example, if gas prices are going up, that can have an impact on a lot of things. So we have to look at those line items and make sure we've made appropriate adjustments. And then the council goes through the budget adoption process in partnership with staff. We monitor the results of the budget, how we're doing over time. I mentioned those quarterly reports, and then we make adjustments through budget amendments, which we do several times a year as necessary. This is the definition of a budget. Another definition is an economic plan that focuses on our financial and human resources and the accomplishment of specific goals and objectives. So that's really emphasized. It's important that we have a strategic budget, and they're established by the policymakers, which is the city council. And then we have a biennial budget, as I mentioned, and these expenditures are called appropriations. So you will see that mentioned in some of our financial reporting as a city. There'll be a certain amount appropriated to a fund to be spent, and that's really at the council level. And then there are line items in the budget, and we don't manage necessarily to each individual line item because things do change throughout the year. But at the fund level, we're very focused and required by law to finish under our appropriation level. And sometimes when we amend the budget, we'll increase the appropriation level. A good example of why we might do that is sometimes we'll get a grant to do a big project, and that grant might be several $1 million. We'll have to amend the budget to be able to receive the grant and to be able to spend the grant funds. And that would be one example of how you might exceed your appropriation and need an amendment for it. Here are some influences on the budget. A lot of these are things that Public Works gets involved with, but there are a lot of different things. This is, again, a part of, these are like the spices of the recipe for creating the budget. There are a lot of different things that influence it, and we'll be referencing all of these various plans that we have. We don't have a water comprehensive plan, but we do have a sewer comprehensive plan. We have a stormwater plan. Sorry that I can't tell for you, but the bottom right is cut off a little bit. And I can't recall what's there, but we have an economic development plan that we're working on right now. There are elements to our comprehensive plan, like our parks element, that guide our investments, that really set the future for us. The comprehensive plan is a 20-year time horizon. So we reference that a lot. It's updated and amended every year. And then every 10 years, there's the periodic update, which we're about to do, which is a big overhaul, big review of the entire thing. But that's a key vision for us to shoot for and to budget for in the shorter time periods as we move forward. Our transportation plan, again, is a thing that we have. So yeah, these are all things that impact the budget, and there are more that we didn't even list here. Here are a few other additional influences. Fund balance. So we have all these different funds, and when you see Kelly's presentation, she's going to focus more on the funds. But there are different funds with different rules in a city, and those will have balances that are carried forward from year to year. And there are best practices around how much money you should have. Essentially, it's like your savings account. Should you have a significant revenue loss or something big change, you want to make sure you've got reserves in the various funds to handle that, or another strategy for handling that. Contingency planning, some cities will create a second reserve fund for like their general fund to handle economic fluctuations. So that might be one example. The balancing the operating budget can be a real challenge at times, depending upon what it is and what's going on. But certainly the general fund, which collects a lot of general tax revenue for the city, it's more volatile with the economy. So that can be a challenge, and that can impact how the budget turns out. You might have to make some budget cuts, for example. One-time revenues. The city received American Rescue Plan Act funds from the federal government a few years ago. That was a big one-time revenue, and that can have an influence on how the budget looks, depending upon how that's accounted for. Fluctuating revenues. You have to be careful with fluctuating revenues because you could plan on a bunch of ongoing services, and if you budget those with fluctuating revenues and then those revenues drop, you are going to have a difficult time sustaining your services. So you've got to really think about where's the money coming from and will it still be there consistently in the future. Fees and charges, looking at whether the city is keeping up with the cost of providing services and what it charges. And then debt level and capacity. The city has the ability, just like individuals do, to issue debt in order to do very big, typically capital projects, big buildings and things like that, facilities, and there are limits to that, just like there are for individual people. So we have to be very aware of those, and those can influence the budget as well. So fund structure. This is just a note on funds. Again, I said Kelly will follow up with a second presentation with more detail. But accounting rules and regulations really have an influence, and these are national, on the types of funds that can be used and what they can be used for. They do set the budget focus. For example, we have a fund that's dedicated to sewer, to wastewater. It's very focused. It has a mission. It's run like a business of its own. We charge fees to ratepayers in the city, whether they're businesses or individuals, but essentially property owners, to help fund those services that are provided. And there are reserves in the sewer fund as well that are there to, again, handle revenue disruptions or other things in some cases. And in our case in particular, we're saving some of the reserve. We're building it up a bit for a future capital project that we're planning to expand our wastewater treatment plant, which is required at different points in the growth of a city. So that is a good example of one that has a specific focus. They all do, and then Kelly will cover those more. The financial objectives of the city or town. So these are all about what we're about. Oh, there go my lights. My apologies. But they reflect what we do here, what we own, for example, and so on and so forth. And they assist in budget development. So the sewer fund, it's a fund. It's separate. It's segregated. The general fund, which again is where we receive our general revenues, could give money to the sewer fund, but the sewer fund cannot give money to the general fund unless it charges interest. And there are all kinds of rules, and it's not a good practice. So it segregates the money in the overall city's budget in ways that where it might seem like if you look at the overall city budget, there's $30 million there, for example, but in reality, that 30 million is broken up into a bunch of limited funds. So it is not as it appears necessarily. And just to note that not all fund types require a budget appropriation. That's kind of a nuance, but that is true. This is what the budget calendar looked like in 2023 in the fall for the 2024 budgets that were being developed across the state. And it's just an example of how the budget process rolls out. You can see that internally from June to August, staff are working really hard to put the budget together at the department level with the administration. And then ultimately that budget is put out. And this process is a little bit later than one that we typically run. June to August would be just that for us. Late September, we'd be looking to get it out to the council and start that discussion with the council, which we'd run through October. And then right around Thanksgiving is when we look to get our budget adopted. But these are sort of the outer limits of the state calendar. And as you can see, like December 31st is adoption of the budget. And some cities have actually gone to that extreme of meeting on December 31st because of a variety of reasons and challenges with their budget. Thankfully, that's never happened to me, and I hope that never happens here to us in Sedro-Woolley. We try to stay well ahead of that. There are also public hearings that were a part of that calendar, though, that are worthy of taking note of. And if you follow the city's agenda packets, you will see those opportunities pop up as we get into the fall of this year. So the toughest issue in the budget process pretty much every year is balancing the general fund, again, because of a lot of fluctuating revenues that are tied to the economy and a whole lot of services that got provided out of there. Well over 50% of the city's general fund is public safety, police and fire, and that leaves not as much room for a lot of other services that also get funded out of this area. So we divert money to parks, for example, from the general fund. Streets has money diverted out from the general fund. And then all the city hall staff, at least portions of the positions, are funded by the general fund. Planning and building is funded by the general fund. So there are a lot of different things that come out of the general fund, including some facility funding as well. That's part of parks for us. So yeah, we ask a lot of questions of ourselves when we're balancing the budget. Are we meeting the council's goals? Are we meeting the financial policies? We've got to look at typically close to 70% of the city's budget is wages and benefits for employees because we're a service-driven organization. That's just the way that works everywhere. But we have to calculate all of those formulas, go through and look at what's changing with health insurance, what's changing with other benefits that employees are paid, wage impacts, all of that inflation that we had in 2022 had an impact on wages. So there are a lot of different things to look at as we put it together. And then we have to look at levels of service and think about if we're making cuts to the budget, what would be acceptable, what would not be acceptable. There are conversations there with the mayor and the council that would typically occur if we were having to make some cuts. And then, and which we do, by the way, we make targeted cuts. We don't tend to do across the board cuts, but we have made some cuts. And we have impacted some levels of service over the years. And then avoid creative budgeting practices is just good advice. We try to stray away from these interfund loans. We had some of those. We've retired them all at this point. That's where, for example, the sewer fund might loan money to the general fund to do something. Interest is charged. Essentially, the general fund doesn't have enough money to do whatever it was that wanted to be done. And it's not a good practice. Those are a maximum of 3 years, but you end up charging interest between funds in the city. And unless it's something you really, really want to get done, everybody's really transparent and intentional about it, it's just not a good practice. There are other things that you should not move money between as well. Fire to EMS is an example. And then interlocal agreements for service is just put there because it's a question mark around what partnerships could be developed. And could those be beneficial to the city, lower the cost of service, keep the same or better, or have a better level of service? Cities often lose some control over the service when they do partnerships, and so there's a give and take in these discussions, but it's a key question to be asking and thinking about as you're balancing the budget. And lastly, for my presentation, establishing goals. to provide guidance. This is a council process. This will happen at our February work session. So if you're following along with the council this year, look at that first Wednesday in February as an opportunity to see this process play out. But essentially, the council will be looking at their current goals, evaluating and discussing if those are the right goals going forward, if they want to add some new goals to the process and to our list. If the implementation is what they want to see, there'll be a variety of things that come out of that discussion that, again, will help us build the budget for 25-26 and even make some tweaks potentially to our current list of goals. So that is, in a nutshell, the initial high-level budget presentation that we provided to council at our work session in early January. And again, Kelly Kohnken, our Finance Director, will have the second part of this, which will come along in a little while. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions or want to contact me at the city, feel free to do so at any point. My email address is cbush@sedro-woolley, WOOLLEY.gov. And my direct line is 360-855-9921. Give me a call anytime. Thanks again for watching.